Hey there, yarn crazies. If you don't enjoy using double pointed needles or small diameter fixed tip needles, Magic Loop is a great option for knitting those small diameter objects in the round like those socks, mitts, baby hats, and stuffies. After watching one of my Magic Loop how-to episodes, however, a viewer asked about Colorwork sweater sleeves worked in the round with Magic Loop and mentioned that they had some trouble with that. So today I want to show you what that process looks like, how I combat my personal tendency towards loose stitches, and the best tip I've ever run across if you're someone whose floats are always too tight. By the way, the Colorwork pattern you are going to see me demonstrate here is the Aspen stitch pattern from page 29 of this book. This is the Knitivation Stitch Dictionary by Andrea Rangel. I'll be doing a full review of this book in the very near future, so make sure you hit those subscribe and notify icons down below so you can give this a watch when it comes out. Now, on to the good stuff. Okay, here is the sample I have been working with. And as you can see, I started out with about 1.5 inches of twisted rib for this sample. And of course, down at the bottom, when I did my initial cast on, I did my basting line trick to keep that from twisting. There's some of my stitch markers indicating my in-row repeats for this Colorwork pattern. I'm really happy with how this is turning out so far. Let's flip around and look at the side where the tips are currently. There's the tails of my lifeline that I've run through this row so that if I screw up, I have a reset point. I'll get those tails out of the way. There's my beginning and end of row marker. I like setting it in a little ways instead of having it right at the edge. Let me figure out where I am in my pattern and show you how I tension my stitches. Of course, since I'm a picker, continental, I carry my yarn on the left hand, and I like having it on this side because I can feel when one line goes slack and when it doesn't, and I have a free hand for pulling out slack, adjusting tension of my strands, turning a page in my pattern, answering the phone, whatever I need to. Getting things like this out of the way. All right, let's go for my stitches. I'll use a fingertip or fingernail, just separate my strands to grab the one that I need. Again, I can feel if one of those strands is more slack than the other, and I can fix it at that time. And of course, I can always look at the back and see if there's excess material, if something doesn't look right, if something looks a little too tight, a little too loose. Here towards the end of the row, we're approaching the area that tends to make most people nervous about doing color work with Magic Loop. The area that's the splits between the two halves of the stitches. Stick this needle tip back in there, get back to our set point, and get ready to make the jump from one side to the other. Now, the sterling silver color, that real light color I'm working with, is the next one that I need. So I tend to twist the yarns a little bit so that that yarn carries over the top of the other one for this transition to the other side. Pull our needle out, set our big loop, and I'm going to reach up and over and grab that. Now, my next one is going to be this maroon color, so I'm going to get my lifeline strand out of the way here so I can do this stitch. And now I can grab the color that I need for this stitch. And I'm carrying the maroon over the top of the white, which is spiraling them together a little bit and helping keeping them more secure. If your biggest challenge is that your floats are always too tight, here is the best tip I've ever heard for fixing that particular problem. Work the project with the wrong side facing out. Why? Because the floats have to wrap around the outside of the project and they are naturally just a smidge longer because of that distance they have to cover. And if a float is too tight, you can see it almost immediately and you can do something about it then. But here is the thing, you have to do Magic Loop backwards to pull this off. Now don't worry if your brain did a bit of a backflip just now over that idea. Mine did too when I first tried it, but don't worry. It's a really simple adjustment and here's what that process looks like. So of course, to work this wrong side out, we have to orient the fabric that way. So we're just going to grab everything and we're going to turn it wrong side out. Pull everything through. And there's our tube, just the wrong side facing. And there's that lovely messy spaghetti bowl of yarn overs that hides on the wrong side of Colorwork fabric. I'm going to take my lifeline tail here, my lifeline anchor, and stuff it inside, get it out of the way. And now you're confused because the working yarn is not in the right place and your brain and your fingers are trying to figure out what on earth am I supposed to do now. It took my brain a little while to latch on, and I kept turning it every which way, trying to decide what am I supposed to do with this, because it's just nothing's right where it needs to be. Part of it looks right and part of it's wrong. And I kept turning and turning and turning, trying to figure out what on earth am I supposed to do with this. And that's when I realized you just have to pay attention to the direction that you're supposed to be working. And that is kind of your guide. The working yarn is coming off of the last stitches formed. You need to get it behind the next stitches to be worked. You pull out your front needle, pull out your big loop, set yourself that nice tight angle. I like holding mine at this angle. It reduces the amount of pull that happens between the two halves of your stitches, helps avoid laddering. And then you identify the next stitch to be worked, and you just go for it. I'm approaching the end of my row here. Grab the color I need and form that first stitch of this half. Instead of working on the stitches on the front needle and the needle closest to you, you're working stitches on the section of stitches farther away from you. And there we go, that one. Just a few left to finish this row. You're not doing anything different as far as your stitches. You're not doing anything different when it comes to following the chart. You're just doing magic loop a little different way than you might be accustomed to. You can see there's my lifeline strand, and here's the beginning of my new row. We'll be working across this next once we get done with those. Now I'm going to show you how easy it is to see your floats. You can tell when you work around on the outside here, those floats, they have to work around this area, so they have to be a little bit longer. That keeps them from being too tight. And you can see, because the floats are facing outward, you can see them. You can see if they're too loose or too tight. Now I'm going to finish out the rest of this row, and I'm going to show you that transition again. 2 stitches left on this half. There's that silvery color. And bring that wine color up and around. That half is done, and it's time to do the turn and work on the other half again. Turn our needles, stick the loose one back in, grab the working yarn, carry it around to behind those stitches where it needs to be to work them properly as normal knit stitches. You can see the pattern inside. Load my yarn up, pull this front needle out, not the back one, the front one, and get ready to continue in my Colorwork sequence. Warp speed knitting. Now, if you want to be able to check and see how this is looking, sure, you can see your floats, but what does the front of the fabric look like? Just turn it with the right side out again and get a look at what you're doing. Just check and see how's my fabric doing? How's the balance? So far, pretty good. There you go. I hope you found that helpful, and if there is some crochet or knitting technique or situation you have been wrangling with and you'd like me to cover it, please let me know, because I'm here to help. And in the meantime, don't forget to take time today to make something that makes you happy. And thanks for watching I Heart Yarn.